Hello, today is World Humanitarian Day, and as every year on the 19th of August, we get together to honor the work of humanitarian workers and to celebrate their achievements. There isn't much to celebrate, however, this year, as we have seen more than 250 attacks on humanitarians in 2013, making it one of the worst years on record, like the worst year on record in this respect. The objective of this hangout is to share experiences among humanitarians on the challenges which aid workers face on a daily basis and the possible actions which could be done at the local and international level to improve the situation. We have here representatives from several humanitarian organizations. We have gotten them together from 5 different locations. Let's start with a short presentation of each of our interlocutors here today. So let's start with Tarek from MSF.
Yes, good afternoon. Hello everybody to the Hangout. My name is Tarek Bashbaweb. I work with the Médecins Sans Frontières MSF office in Amsterdam. Originally, I became a humanitarian, I guess, just because I wanted to help people, you know, and to help them in their most difficult time during times of conflict and provide them with assistance and protection when they are the most vulnerable. Thank you, and looking forward to our exchanges.
Thank you. Next we go to Jerusalem, where we have Alex from World Vision.
It's a pleasure to be with you. And yes, I'm based in Jerusalem. Of course, at the moment we're doing a lot of work in Gaza with the response there, and I'm going back there tomorrow. I've been involved in the humanitarian industry for the last 20 years in various locations around the world, and like my colleagues, you know, I got into this line of work because I wanted to make a difference and make a contribution to humanity globally. Thank you.
Thank you. We stay in the Middle East, but we go to Lebanon, where we talk to Naomi from the Danish Refugee Council.
Hi, I'm Naomi, and Information Management
Naomi, sorry if
why do I aligns a bad
having a bad line. We don't hear you very well.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe start again from your presentation.
Can you? Does it help if I'm right up on the computer? Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So I do this work because it's a job that aligns with my values, and it gives me an opportunity, like everybody else on this forum, to make a difference with a lot of great people. I have a great team here, and I've been very lucky to work with a lot of other great teams and other organizations. And I'm very much looking forward to this opportunity to share that with everybody here today.
Thank you very much. So now we move to Rachel and Kayam. Hello, Rachel and Kayam from Solidarité Internationale.
Hi, so my name is Kayam Allen. I'm currently the desk, the program manager for the Asia desk at headquarters. I was previously head of mission in the Central African Republic. And I'll be by myself, so Rachel is not with me right now. Why am I a humanitarian? Well, just to add a bit to what my colleagues have said, I think that in addition, the values that I inscribed in the humanitarian principles that we all share are really what drives me and motivates me to do the work.
Thank you very, very much. So next we have with us from Lebanon, Rui from Acción contra el Hambre.
Hello everyone, my name is Rui Oliveira. I have recently joined the ACF Lebanon as country director. Well, in this beautiful and very challenging country, from this brief experience, I have a lot to share with you. So looking forward to exchange with all of you guys. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Rui. And now we go to the Central African Republic and the Office of the International Medical Corps, where we will talk to Torian and Martin. Hello.
I'm currently the program officer in CAR with IMC, and so another humanitarian worker once said that our work is intended to bring a measure of humanity, however insufficient, into situations that should not exist. And I think that that is what drives me to do this work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This is Martin, protection coordinator.
My colleague here.
Sorry, this is Martin, the protection coordinator in Central Africa with my colleague Tori. So, just like the rest have said, I also just wanted to make a difference in people's lives, especially the vulnerable. Thank you, and I look forward to sharing.
Thank you very much. We have a problem. As you can see, we don't have a video link to the IMC colleagues right now, but hopefully this can be fixed in the course of our conversation. So, World Humanitarian Day. How do you feel about it? Do you see it as an occasion to celebrate, and do you see it as a personal day? What do you think are the biggest challenges for you and the other humanitarians today? Basically, shall we go back to the same order of talking? Tarak at MSF.
Yeah, thank you for bringing me in. On this question, I think that I wouldn't call it a day of celebration. Of course, you have a lot of people working around the planet and to try to alleviate the suffering of people in crisis, you know, people in precarious situations, particularly in conflict settings. And I think, yeah, we can maybe tip our hats to all the people that are making differences at field level every day, but I wouldn't say that there is a cause for celebration. As you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of challenges related to the security around the provision of assistance and protection in crisis, and the dangers, you know, could be related to the changing nature of conflict, as oftentimes people say that you know, it's not as easy as it was 150 years ago when the first ideas were brought forward around the ICRC and so on, to have a neutral and impartial, independent actors going between two different fighting parties and being accepted by both sides. And bringing relief to combatants at the time, or combatants that had been wounded, or even the civilians that paid the price for it. So of course the conflicts have changed, and today we face different types of actors. But I think there is also a general feeling about what humanitarians have come to represent. And unfortunately, over the last 20 years, the work of humanitarians has often been instrumentalized, has often been used for other objectives than just responding to the needs of the people in crisis. Humanitarians have been compared to force multipliers, you know, have been seen as instruments of foreign policy, and I think a lot of times some of the insurgents groups that we meet and that we try to negotiate an acceptable working space, a secure working space for our teams, often see us as part of the problem. They associate us with other governments, or they associate us with where we come from, our background, our Western identity, and that sometimes is unsurmountable. So I think that maybe to look forward and in order to anticipate, you know, a worsening of these conditions, I think we should go back to what humanitarianism stood at the start, which is a limited ability to help those most in need, and without any political objectives behind it, and without representing a chance for one side or the other in a conflict to help them in that conflict, or to sustain one side or the other. I think by concentrating on those aspects and showing in action in the field showing our impartiality, showing our neutrality, I think we will be able to expand our ability to work, to expand our working space, and to be recognized and respected for what we are, which is basically people trying to help others in a moment of crisis. By going back to basics, I think we may have an opportunity to turn back some of the challenges we have faced over the last 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tarek. So, the changing nature of conflict, the instrumentalization of humanitarian aid, and the use of humanitarian workers as instruments of foreign policy, and the need for more respect for the work of humanitarians. Is this a challenge that others among you recognize? Rui, for example, is that something that you see as a big challenge of humanitarian aid, and what would you add?
Of course. We believe, I agree with Tarak, we believe that the proliferation of different groups that are appearing on the humanitarian scene is imposing different challenges to the response, of course. Working on the acceptance strategy, when we have this dissemination of groups that are not working, bounded by any international humanitarian law, is imposing us new ways to actually proceed on this acceptance strategy. First of all, because it's very, very difficult to identify these groups and how to actually speak and negotiate the humanitarian space with them. And even by doing so, we don't know the intentions that they will have against or to support the humanitarian relief. Well, by saying that, we put ourselves at risk whenever we talk to an unidentified group that is impinging us or impairing us to deploy humanitarian relief, and we are still working on the protective measures to do so. On the other hand, also, most of the time, some groups link humanitarian organizations, especially international organizations, with a political agenda from donors or other countries. And this aspect normally goes throughout the communities, and the perception gets into the community, and it's very difficult then to support our actions. However, we in ACF, we do reckon that we have the right to free and access the victims of every conflict, and by saying that, we will try to find this access and to have free access and direct access to the victims, whether it's by negotiating with the authorities or governments, or whether it's negotiating with other groups, maintaining, of course, our transparency and independence and neutrality. Well, but that's an issue that we have to deal nowadays.
Thank you. Thank you. Alex, you and World Vision are working on one of the hottest crises, the Gaza conflict right now, which has seen, again, humanitarian workers under attack. Can you tell us whether, in your experience, you have witnessed attacks on humanitarians, or whether you yourself have been a victim of such an assault in your experience?
Well, a week ago I was pinned down by artillery and mortar fire for about 3 hours as I was trying to enter into Gaza, and then the next day we're coming under fire from tanks that nearby our location. I have to say that my staff on the ground have been working in an environment, a very dangerous environment, and one where in Gaza there's nowhere that you can escape. There are no safe zones. There's no place where displaced people can escape to. The whole place is the front line. So they run a huge risk. And but I'd like to really add something to the comments of my colleagues before, because I certainly identify with the shrinking humanitarian space, the lack of respect for humanitarian missions, and the political nature, increasingly, of donations from donor governments. But but I believe we do have a cause to celebrate, and even in Gaza, currently we have a cause to celebrate. And I think there are two reasons why we should celebrate. The first is the people. In the last 20 years, I have had the great privilege to work with some of the finest people that I have met in any walk of life. Some of the most courageous people, some of the most dedicated. And Gaza is a very good example of such a thing, that when the crisis first started, we asked for volunteers among our staff who would be prepared in the midst of the bombing and the shelling to start to implement a response in terms of psychosocial and food supplies and that, to begin to meet the need. And 100% of our staff volunteered immediately. And they have been going at risk to themselves, out of their homes, moving around in extremely dangerous conditions. And this is what, to me, typifies the nature and the spirit of humanitarian people across the globe and across all organizations. I've encountered such people in every context I've worked and among all organizations I've worked with. So I think we have reason to celebrate that. And I also believe we have reason to celebrate our success. Despite these growing challenges, the growing complexity, the growing danger, you still can easily see the impact of humanitarian work on the ground. Visit any of the major crises and you will see people being sheltered, people being fed. You will see hope being born in the midst of crisis. You will see children who are being cared for and who are being given psychological support. And so despite these really significant challenges, I do believe we can celebrate success. We don't always get it right. It's true. We make mistakes. Yes, the work is getting more challenging. But I think we should also take a pause to celebrate the amazing difference that the humanitarian community makes. Imagine if we weren't there. Imagine, the hopelessness and what would happen to the lives of so many people if we weren't there.
Thank you very much. It was very inspiring, and I agree with you. Going to the Central African Republic, Torian and Martin, you work in a very, very challenging environment yourself, and I'm sure that you're experiencing some of the difficulties that were mentioned. Can you tell us, from your experience, what are you seeing? Have you seen attacks on humanitarian workers? Have you yourself experienced such a thing?
Oh, thank you. In Central Africa, we work in a very dangerous environment, and I myself had an experience of having been abducted, but not in Central Africa. That was in Chad. But the environment here is more or less like what I was seeing in Chad. So it's very challenging. There are attacks on humanitarians here. You may have been reading reports from Central Africa, but we keep on trying our best and reaching vulnerable groups to save lives. And as much as it is challenging, I think it's important to emphasize the fact that humanitarians have achieved a lot. The sacrifices they have made to save lives, but they have died in crossfire. So perhaps it's important to ask the international community to seek more protection for the humanitarian workers around the world. And also, humanitarian workers, we need to do more to sensitize the communities we work with, because they don't know what we stand for. As one colleague has already mentioned, they assume we are part of the government that could be supporting the conflict in one way or the other, just because our donors or we happen to have our headquarters in that particular country. So sensitization needs to be done. As one colleague said, the conflict has changed, the actors have changed, and we need also to change and follow the changes that are taking place to ensure that humanitarian workers are safe wherever they are working. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of support comes from the European Commission for the respect of international humanitarian law, and we are strong advocates for the safety of humanitarians and their ability to do their work. What more do you think needs to be done? What can the international community do more and better in order to protect humanitarians' ability to do their work? Naomi, what do you think? I'm afraid we can't hear you. Can you? We have a technical problem again. I'm sorry. Can you start again, please? Can you start again, please? Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Okay. I couldn't hear what my two colleagues from the Central African Republic and the gentleman working in Gaza were saying. So apologies if there's any repetition. But I mean, things that we can do more. I think we need to look at some of the key reasons we have what would be deliberate attacks on humanitarians, whether it's simply that their role is not fully recognized or understood, or, as I've read in many other places, differentiated from other roles that may be ongoing in country that could be easily complicated as not just being humanitarian. It's been very difficult, increasingly so, to identify what really makes a humanitarian and how we can give a perception of ourselves or communicate who we are and what we're doing as an overall community to the people we're working with. I think the most important thing is that that what we're doing is considered to be what one of our core principles is, which is neutral. And that if in any given emergency there is a group, for example, that is carrying out any kind of humanitarian actions as well, so for example a military organization that may well be delivering relief items, it is recognized that they are independent and that armed forces, you know, are not using aid agency emblems to cause any confusion. And that has been problems in the past in various conflicts that I've been in, certainly in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I think there needs to be some links between what we do with the military, and they are essential. However, we need to be very careful how we manage those, especially for larger, rapid humanitarian operations. I do think that professional humanitarian workers, everybody on this forum, are in danger, along with the rest of our colleagues, if we are associated with these different factions that are working in various areas, whether they be military, political, religious, or, I mean, for example, if they have any kind of ideological or authorization. And again, therefore, it's very important that we respect all these different groups and their distinct separate roles, but that we're, again, extremely well at communicating to the beneficiaries that we're trying to assist, other organizations that we're working with, and local communities, exactly who we are, that we comply with international rules, and that we completely abide by the principles of international humanitarian law and defend solely humanitarian action. I think that we can avoid integrating humanitarian activities into military and political campaigns, and leave that to the people that do it best, and the professionals who are trained and understand the entire context to do so. I do think that there could be some advocacy for authorities to stop blocking humanitarian aid, and at the end of the day that comes from all of us, whatever part of this humanitarian community we are, to work together to ensure that happens with one voice.
Thank you very much. It's quite significant, I think, that many of you, no matter where you are based and no matter you have been working throughout your career, mention sort of the same challenges and the same problems that you have experienced. So one of you, Alex, spoke about the very difficult environment in which humanitarians find themselves, and also in which those who you're trying to help find themselves. So there is no safe place either for humanitarians or for victims. And this is something that came throughout repeatedly in this conversation. Kayam, what do you think the international community can do more of in order to alleviate this problem? Because, I mean, it's a problem for humanitarians, but even more, it's a problem for the people that you're trying to help.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things have already been said. And it's true that the confusion that we see in the field, I think the public can see it just watching the news today, where the word humanitarian is thrown everywhere, whether it's with the aid that is being given in Iraq, in Gaza, and other places. And the first thing I think we need to do as an international community is really to, yes, recognize that different entities, international governments, NGOs, private companies, all can have a role to play in aiding countries that are going through crisis. But we need to make sure that we all have our space and that we each respect our own space. So a lot of my colleagues did mention the humanitarian principles that we NGOs abide to. But when the word humanitarian is just thrown like this, without taking into consideration independence, neutrality, then it clearly makes our job in the field a lot more difficult to make people understand what we're trying to do and not being confused with maybe the same flag of our organization that comes from a given country. So, I mean, that's for me one of the main things. And on the same line, in the field, I personally witnessed a lot of problems in communication from us, the NGOs, towards just the people we're trying to help. It's very hard for them to understand where we're coming from, what independence means, and I think that we need to spend a lot more time simply explaining what we're trying to do, what we're trying to represent, and how we want to deliver support to those people.
Thank you very much. What we are trying to do and what we represent, these are the two questions that I think everyone needs to know more about in order to for the international community to protect your work and to serve better those that you're trying to help. Today, the UN Secretary General called attacks on humanitarian workers an outrage, and we would all agree. But let's talk a bit more about what can be done about it, because you know from your own experience why humanitarians get attacked and how this challenges the work of everyone in the field. But what more can be done? Back to Tarak in Amsterdam.
Yes, thanks. I think first of all we have to be clear in understanding for deliberate attacks, for targeted attacks. So we're not talking about attacks where you are in the wrong place at the wrong time. We're talking about deliberate attacks. We need to figure out the reasons behind them, right? Oftentimes it is easy to say, okay, there is a political connotation, but if you actually look deeper a little bit in incidents, you figure out that there's also sometimes criminal motivations. In resource-scarce environments, NGOs and the cohort of supplies they bring in and the cohort of contracts they sign at field level also attract possible criminal hands that would try to either attack a compound, to steal a car, or depending on the setting, could also consider abducting expatriate workers to obtain money and to ransom governments or non-governmental organization for criminal reasons. So we have to be really careful about the type of attacks that we're facing. As I said, there are some that are clearly political and that are related to the choices that we ourselves make, right? So if you have two communities that are fighting each other, and for whatever reason you can only deliver assistance to one side or one party to the conflict or one side of the conflict, there is a good chance that you might be targeted by the other side of the conflict because they might feel that you are not neutral, right? So I think we should be very careful about our ability to provide assistance across fighting lines, across borders if it is necessary, and in order to reach all those in need, and not to take maybe the easy way out of reaching those that we can without taking, let's say, too many risks. And we have a history of that in the humanitarian system, where we often try to reach those that are most easily accessible, regardless of their level of need, just because it's easier for us. The criminal aspect is very difficult to mitigate against because obviously the reasoning behind the attacks by criminal elements are about money and resources, and this is something that is complicated for us to mitigate. We could try to convince criminal elements living in the area that they themselves have wives and children that might need access, for example, for MSF to healthcare and to medical assistance. That could be interesting for them in order to avoid targeting us. And then we have to be careful, and I would join here what my colleague from Solidarité has said. We have to be careful about what we communicate, what we say, how people look at us and understand what we stand for and why we are there. We will always be seen as outsiders, as externals. So I think we have to be careful in conveying the rationale for our activities, the rationale also for some of our decisions in terms of resource management, human resources, but also logistics, contracts, and so on, so that there is a clear understanding in the communities why we are present there and that we are not trying to push any type of other agenda on them, be it from our national origin or from whatever they perceive us to be. So communication is important, and understanding the type of violence we are really facing in detail, understanding security incidents in detail, and reacting to them in a concerted, strategic fashion in terms of our communication with local communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Listening to you, it seems it confirms what we know, that the work of humanitarian workers is not only more difficult but also more complex, and in a world of many more challenges than ever. We have 4 level 3 crises, and then we have all sorts of other humanitarian challenges around the world, including the forgotten crises that are not making the headlines, but that are equally important. In this context of more dangers, more threats, more complications, and more crises, next year, well, we are already preparing the World Humanitarian Summit, which will take place in 2016. And this is an occasion to discuss between now and then the future of humanitarian aid. What would be your view? How is humanitarian aid changing, and what do you think its future will look like? We first discussed this with Naomi in Lebanon.
The key trends, obviously the humanitarian field has changed drastically over time. And the key things that people think about are the demographic trends. We have more people, we have older people, we have more urbanization, and then we have the technology and the science and the rapid change in that, not just in the time that we have been responding as a humanitarian community, but just even week to week, and what that means on the field level and on a more sort of global coordinated level. The economic trends, so the uneven growth, increasing inequality. And then you've got things like the climate change. As we all know, we have more disasters in very specific areas. And the two more, the conflict, so prolonged and increasingly urban conflicts that we're facing. And lastly, the political power, so the changing global patterns and the changing domestic determinants. I think all of these are things that need to be taken into account and need to be looked at very carefully to think how we can respond more efficiently as an organization in a safe and sustainable manner.
Thank you. With the same question, we go to Alex. Alex, what do you think? How should humanitarian aid change to not only to respond, but in a way to preempt the difficulties and the challenges within which it operates?
I think one of the most critical trends that we're facing is increasingly poverty and vulnerability is being linked to these ongoing conflict areas. So our future lies in being able to work effectively in these kind of environments, with all of the difficulties in that involves. And as my colleagues have well pointed out, for us to operate effectively in these kind of areas, we really have to address the issue of humanitarian space. And I believe that to address that effectively, we have to start with ourselves. And I think too often we have been guilty of, in a sense, selling our souls to the highest bidder. And I think that there's a lot more required in terms of solidarity within our organizations, amongst ourselves, to say to governments who insist on using aid for political purposes rather than strictly humanitarian purposes, to say that we're not going to play this game anymore, and that to stand together and to say enough. It is time to go back to basics, and to say we need to first address the issue of humanitarian space. We need to be able to present ourselves, to overcome these challenges, and present ourselves as truly neutral and not pawns of particular governments, etc. So I think that this is a trend that is not going to stop. I think we need to make the adjustments in terms of how we deliver humanitarian aid, how we operate on the ground, how we effectively communicate, as my colleagues have said, communicate the message of our purpose there, police ourselves very strictly in terms of adherence to our principles, and to promote a solidarity among ourselves, to say to donor governments, look, we're simply not going to do this anymore. And if you're interested in donating for humanitarian purposes, then we'd love to work with you. If not, I really think that it starts with us, and I think we need to make this adjustment ourselves. We need to perhaps put more time and effort into addressing how we effectively are going to operate in this kind of environment going forward, and communicating amongst ourselves and supporting one another in terms of how we do that. Maybe a tough message, but
thank you. You mentioned an important concept, the humanitarian space, and the need to protect the space within humanitarian workers can operate independently and under the shield of the humanitarian principles. Rui, in your work fighting hunger and malnutrition, have you encountered many situations in which humanitarian space has been endangered? Can you give us some examples, and what you would suggest needs to be done in order to protect it?
Sure. Well, as many of our colleagues were pointing, the difficulties that we are facing now by dealing with different groups and stakeholders and players on the humanitarian arena is imposing different challenges. For instance, how Tarek was pointing, how to deal with balancing the access in one area that is controlled by an opposition group, and not accessing another area that is controlled by a government authority. It has to be decided on a regular basis, and every situation is different from another. But I would say, for instance, that in Afghanistan we've managed to operate and decided to operate in areas that were controlled not by the government, while the government was not allowing us to access the victims that were controlled on their areas, which for us it's very difficult. Eventually we've managed to do so. But it's critical. It's a decision that you need to take, whether you support the victims and try to open the access on the other hand, or you decide to stick for the principles and be so tight that you cannot operate, and it's challenging indeed, and it's also here in Lebanon, for instance, we are suffering from this misconception about aid delivery regarding the Syrian refugees, and it's a daily concern for us. The only way that we can manage to mitigate this is by working on the acceptance strategy again. It's all about acceptance. I think that we're becoming extremely technical as humanitarians as well, and we forgot that our work is actually a human relation most of the times. So if I want to put things on the ground at the field level, I would say that it's actually to don't forget to communicate with people what we are doing. Most of the times they are the ones protecting us from any dangerous situation. So we really need to focus on this. We lose most of our times dealing with technical issues and implementing. We're rushing to implement according to certain calendars that we have. We need to spend a great deal of time talking with people and actually stating to them that we are humanitarians and we have our principles, and we are there for just one cause, which is to relieve the beneficiaries from their situation.
Thank you very much. So it seems that the priorities only get more numerous. So there is, of course, the number one priority of delivering humanitarian assistance to those who need it the most, and it's challenging in any case. Then there is the priority of keeping humanitarian workers safe as much as possible, the priority to protect humanitarian space, and apparently, listening to you, there is also the priority of communicating with the beneficiaries and with everyone on the ground about what humanitarians are doing, how it is important, and why it needs to be protected and assisted. Torian and Martin, probably in the Central African Republic and elsewhere where you have operated, you have seen from experience the need to do all of these things at the same time. But could you tell us something more about how you tackle the challenge of communications? Because, of course, worldwide, we all need to be more aware of what humanitarian workers are doing. But I imagine that that it's something that you also have seen on the ground. So it would be interesting to hear your experience.
We cut out for a little bit, so I missed some of the conversation before, but I do very much agree with what I did manage to hear.
Hello? It seems that we lost the connection to Torian. Maybe we should try again. Hello? Okay, so let's discuss this with Kayam, because Kayam, you also mentioned communication as one of the things that you find to be a priority. But how do you juggle all these balls at the same time and in very difficult conditions? Hello? Technical issues. We are talking about communications, and it seems that that this is a problem that we have here on the technical field as well. All right. So maybe we can try again with Torian in the Central African Republic. Hello? Hi. So we couldn't talk about the importance of communicating with the beneficiaries and the other people on the ground about what you're doing. So can you try to tell us now? No, it seems that that it's difficult to be in touch right now. So in any event, in the preparation of the World Humanitarian Summit, what else do you think is important to know? Maybe shall we try again with the Central African Republic one more time, Torian? We see you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, maybe.
Okay. Sorry, I missed a lot of that, but I think that something that has become apparent in our work here that has helped us is our focus on, even though we're an international organization, really focusing on our community-based approach and maintaining that open dialogue and lines of communication with communities that we're working in. As a security strategy, but also as a programming strategy. And we have found that the more people understand what we're doing, the more that they value what we're doing, and the more that is, they're willing to be involved, which translates into a sort of protection mechanism for us when we're working in situations and areas which may contain a lot of security risks, for example, those controlled by certain armed groups. We found that not only does this help us in our security strategy, but it's also helped us create better programs where we're effectively building resilience in the community, which, as we're talking about the nature of humanitarian crises recently, a lot of them are protracted and recurrent conflicts, such as that in the Central African Republic. And so these ideas of this work towards building resilience, developing capacity of local actors and national humanitarians is really important to us and something that we see as a way forward in this country and also for humanitarian response in general. I think that ECHO and IMC are trying to
We lost you. I'm sorry, because it was very interesting to hear the rest of the story, but let's try again a bit later. But it seems that from what you are saying and from what we see on our TV screens every day and what we read in the media every day, there are so many crises and so much suffering and so many challenges and so many dangers for humanitarian workers. What keeps you going? What motivates you to keep doing what you're doing? First one to answer this question, Tarek?
What keeps me going? The kid that gets out of the therapeutic feeding center after his treatment and is able to go back to their community. The lady that is able to deliver and won't lose her life because she's able to do it in a safe environment. Those type of things, I think, keep us going, you know. I think in general, even if there's a multitude of crises, I think we have to be realistic as well, and maybe this can help also reflect a little bit from this discussion. It is important to realize what humanitarian aid is. I just heard, and I have to disagree, you know, humanitarian aid is not about building resilience in people. Humanitarian aid is about saving lives in the present right now. It has to be allowed to act beyond borders, beyond governments, beyond military forces, to respond to needs that are born out of crisis and that don't have long-term implications. This is the work of humanitarians. We are not development workers. We are not linking rehabilitation and so on. Let's not get all confused, multi-mandates and so on. It is important to stick to what we know how to do well, which is to save lives during emergencies. This is what the humanitarians should do, and by actually proposing that to communities around the planet and to say, this is what we do, we save lives when you are in crisis. We are not here to change your way of living. We are not here to impose any other agenda. We are here when you need us most in a situation of crisis, and when no one else can respond. This is where we are here for you people, and we hope that you will accept us to do our job for a limited time period, a few months at most, in order to get over the crisis that you have gone through, and then you can have other types of organizations coming in and rebuilding and doing development work. This is not what humanitarians are about. Humanitarians are about saving lives in the now and here, and this is, I think, by sticking to this mandate, by sticking to this band-aid that we represent in a crisis. We are not there to solve political problems or crises as such. We respond, we save lives. That's what we do. I think by concentrating on that aspect of our work, we should be able to convince some of the most difficult interlocutors we have that we are genuine in what we do and that we can be accepted for what we provide to those communities in crisis. Thanks.
Thank you, Tarek, for your inspiring and passionate answer. Now we move to Naomi in Lebanon again. Naomi, how would you answer this question? What makes you keep doing this job?
Well, a similar answer to my colleague Tariq, and in fact everybody on here. I mean, if I just think of the projects with the Danish Refugee Council here in Lebanon, the emergency response to the displaced Syrians, the emergency food distribution to vulnerable Lebanese host families, the emergency assistance to affected populations in also the neighboring countries, the protection of women at risk, you know, these sort of the sort of overarching projects that we do, but also when as a humanitarian you see the benefits both on an individual level to the sort of community level, it's something which becomes a part of who you are and a part of the team that you work in that you love. The thing is that looking into the future and where all of that is going to go is very important, and I agree in part with some of the comments that have been made by all of my colleagues here on this forum. We have a hugely complex array of actors who make up what we think of as the international humanitarian system, and it's become far more professional and effective over the many years. But the system itself, although it has got better in responding quickly and in preventing death and saving lives, you still do get these shocking reports of thousands of, for example, children dying in Somalia with malnutrition in 2011, or the crisis at the moment in the Central African Republic, what is going on in Gaza. The humanitarian system has not been able to prevent conflicts, and you know that produce the humanitarian emergencies. And even when the warning signs are there, again, like in Somalia, Cote d'Ivoire, Burundi, Yemen, and many other places, Afghanistan, humanitarian actors have not been able to prevent the escalation of hostilities. In fact, what we're there to do, because that's not our responsibility, is to help those who are affected by it. And I do think that the responsibility of the political leaders and institutions to ensure peace and security and take all these actions to mitigate the effects of climate change and some of the other mega trends that I mentioned at the beginning of this particular question. Humanitarians are expected to respond to those and not from the failure of any kind of effective political action. I do think that the interface between the prevention and the response is not very clear-cut. And as evidenced by our growing advocacy role of many humanitarian NGOs and increasing engagement of, for example, the UN Security Council with humanitarian issues, it's something that is being explored and being expanded on. The last thing I'll say is that responding to the challenges that we all and the more creative thinking and visionary leadership by donors, by people on the field, by community-based organizations, listening to the beneficiaries themselves, is going to require a lot of effort, as we've all already been putting in, and us as humanitarian actors to step back from our day-to-day operations and think about the big picture issues that is going to affect our work both tomorrow and in 10 years' time.
Thank you very much. We have to wrap up in a few minutes, so I would just ask Alex how he would answer this question amid so much suffering and so many wars and dangers for humanitarian workers. What keeps you doing what you're doing?
Well, I know it's not for the money. and it's not for the fame, because there's none of that. You know, it is without a doubt in my mind the most rewarding thing that you can do, to be a humanitarian, to see the eyes of a child when hope is born after so much suffering, to hear children singing after days of bombardment because of the work that your team is doing on the ground, to see the smile on a woman as she prepares the first meal for her family in weeks. You know, there's nothing on earth that lifts, you know, I think, our hearts the way that this does, when you see the actual reality of the difference on the ground, that all the work and all the struggle and all of the things that we contend with, when you look into the eyes of the people we serve, and we see the impact of that, we see the life coming, you know, people coming alive again. You know, it's indescribable. I'm struggling for words, and I'm sure we've all expressed these moments where it just like the sun shines through, and you see that we have made a difference, and you see that there is hope and there is light where there was none before. And as I say, I don't have the words to describe that wonderful moment when you look into the eyes of the people we serve, and you know, yes, we got it right. We've won one. We've made a difference. And I think those are the moments that we hold on to in amongst all of the danger and the complications and the frustrations. Those are the moments that we hold dear to our hearts.
Thank you very, very much. It was very moving what you just said, and it makes it even more tragic that your colleagues and you experienced so many difficulties doing what you're doing, and that so many humanitarian workers who are moved by these noble motivations are attacked every year. I would like to wrap up on a positive note, and as you, Alex, said earlier in our conversation, we have a cause to celebrate today. It's World Humanitarian Day is, of course, an occasion to honor the achievement of all of you, but it should be also an occasion to celebrate the important work you're doing and the enormous difference that you're making. And of course, we all agree that humanitarian workers are some of the finest and most courageous and dedicated people that we have all met. And we at the European Commission are very proud to support what you're doing. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work and stay safe. Thank you, and happy World Humanitarian Day.